You have just read about a few strategies for conducting formative assessments in the classroom. As you watch this video, keep the following questions in the back of your mind. What insights about my students and myself can I gain from the results of these formative assessments? What should I do with these insights? What action should I take? We've talked a lot about different strategies for teaching your students, from understanding their learning styles to creating an environment that fosters learning. But how do you know if what you're doing is actually working? How can you make sure your students are actually learning what you want them to learn, and the methods you're using to teach are correct ones? Formative assessments are the answer. Formative assessments are a way to check in with your students and make sure they're understanding the concepts so far. The goal of formative assessment is to monitor student learning to provide ongoing feedback that can be used by instructors to improve their teaching and by students to improve their learning. More specifically, formative assessments help students identify their strengths and weaknesses and to recognize where they might need some additional work. They help faculty recognize where students are struggling and address problems immediately through scaffolding. And they also help teachers see whether or not their teaching methods are working, or if they need to rethink how the unit is structured. Formative assessments are different than summative assessments because summative assessments evaluate student learning at the end of a unit. Think of summative assessments as a formal test you administer and grade. You don't usually grade formative assessments. The goal is not to see how well students did. The goal is to test the waters of their learning and make sure everything is on track. And if you need to find out that students are falling behind or finding the coursework too easy, it gives you a chance to make the necessary changes so you can make sure students are challenged and engaged. Formative assessments are sometimes thought of as being done on the fly because they can be done quickly and easily and oftentimes without a lot of planning or preparation work. You can administer a pop quiz at the end of class or ask the class a few review questions. Pay attention to how well your students respond and how quickly. If they seem to take a long time answering and their answers are a little bit off, you might want to plan a more formal review session to help solidify the concept. If your students' answers are way off, then you might want to restructure the rest of the unit to spend more time going back over those concepts. Pay attention to who is answering and who is not during the assessment. Students who avert their eyes or try to avoid answering may not be feeling comfortable with the material, or it might simply be they don't feel comfortable answering in this format, or their mind is just preoccupied at the moment. It's important to use a lot of different kinds of formative assessments to see how well students are learning, because some of your students might be doing a great job, but they just don't test well. Here are a few more tips for doing formative assessment. Ask students to form pairs or groups and talk about a certain topic. Walk around the room listening to what they say and carry a sheet of paper with you to discreetly keep track of who seems to understand the concept well and who is off the mark. Have students create visual representations such as dioramas or pictures of the concept during class. Create exit cards for your students. These are cards made of slips of paper such as note cards or sticky notes that your students write their names on. Ask them a review question about what they are learning. For example, why is Romeo and Juliet considered a tragedy? And have students write their answers on the paper. Then hand the papers to you on their way out of the class. Once they are gone, take some time to review the answers and divide them into 3 columns. Students who have mastered the concept, students who are on their way to mastering the concept, and students who could benefit from remedial help. Keep track of this information and spend your time during class accordingly, helping those who need help and inviting those who have mastered the concept to work on other things or to help mentor other students. Whatever method you choose, remember, the point of formative assessment is for students to show how well they're mastering the subject so that you can take the appropriate actions in response. Whether those actions include tutoring certain students who need help, shortening a unit that is too easy, or lengthening a unit because most of your students seem to be struggling. When you use formative assessments, you must keep track of the data you collect. As you notice acquisition of a new skill or confusion and struggle with the skill, record the student's name and jot down a brief comment. Consider keeping a folder for each child in which you insert any notes that you make on a daily basis. This process will help you focus on the needs of individual students when you confer with each child or develop lessons for your whole class. Another way to keep track of the data is to use a class list. On this sheet, you can note specific skills and record how each student is learning. You can use a system of check minus check and check plus, or the numbers 4, 3, 2, 1 to indicate student proficiency with a skill. This is very, very important because as you start to differentiate your teaching style and cater to each of your individual students, you will need to have a strong understanding of what they already know. And it's important because you don't want to assess your students' knowledge using just one method. A student might seem to have mastered the concept during a pop quiz, but fall short during group discussion. When you record the results of a variety of formative assessments, you'll be able to have a deeper understanding of your student. And this starts with making sure that the information is written down. Let's review. In this lesson, you learned about formative assessments. Formative assessments are ways to check in with students and make sure they are understanding the concepts. They are not generally graded as heavily as tests. The goal of formative assessments is to help you as a teacher understand how well your students are learning so that you can make any necessary changes or adjustments to your teaching style, the structure of your lessons, or the structure of the unit. Summative assessments are different than formative assessments. These are more like end-of-unit tests or exams that are heavily graded and are used to show a student's mastery of a subject at the end of a period of study. Students usually study and prepare for summative assessments, whereas formative assessments are done as part of the normal class. You learn that it's important to try a variety of formative assessments because some students might not test very well in one format. Methods for formative assessments include paying attention to student performance during group discussions or discussions in pairs, pop quizzes, visuals, and exit cards. Finally, you learn that it's important to write down the results of all these different assessments so you can better understand and cater to the needs of each individual student. Now is a good time to answer the questions you were asked at the beginning of this video.